It is Thursday, the 4th of March 2021. Good evening. My name is Toby Patty Mesme. It's just gone 7pm and this is another edition of MesmePolitics. Coming up tonight, we have got a show for you. So a UK political meltdown. We've got Jeremy Corbyn smears. We've got regressive taxation. We've got Meghan Markle smears. It's all going on. It's all popping off. Also, dire polling for Labour. Also, coming up, a quick run through of everything going on in US politics, why taxes on the wealthy is subjected to so much scaremongering, and why Trump is still a very potent and deadly political force as of right now. Anyway, but first, Keir Starmer. He is unfit for office. Why do I say that? Why is he unfit for office? We're going to unpack it right now. I'm absolutely deadly serious about this. There was an article on Tuesday by Oliver Eagleton for Novara Media called "Keir Starmer is a long-time servant of the British security state." And if you bear with me, I will pop that article in the description. And I'll put it in the chat as well. So if you want to read it, you can get it there. And full credit goes to Oliver Eagleton, who is also writing for Verso Books, a book about Keir Starmer. So the journalism credit goes to Oliver Eagleton here, but this article really did basically put together all the things that made me come to this conclusion. And, I feel like it's right to credit it, and then I'm going to read you some excerpts from it, going through Keir Starmer's record politically to demonstrate why I believe Keir Starmer is wholeheartedly unfit to be Prime Minister. Under Keir Starmer, the work was joined up with the government promoting British soft power under David Cameron. When countries were reluctant to accept outside interference in their legal systems, as Director of Public Prosecutions, Starmer was sometimes flown out to meet their senior statesmen and briefed by the local British embassy on how to talk them round. His eagerness to become a de facto envoy was praised by Tory cabinet ministers. And if we go down further, you've of course got involvement in the Julian Assange case. The most notorious instance in which political affinities seemed to bear on the DPP's judgment was the Julian Assange case. As part of his cooperation with the US, Starmer developed a close and mutually admiring relationship with Eric Holder, the US Attorney General, who in 2010 had authorised several actions aimed at prosecuting the WikiLeaks founder. The CPS intervened to block a course of action, allowing proceedings regarding the sexual assault allegations to go forward as normal, advising Swedish prosecutors that Assange's case should not be dealt with as just another extradition. And of course, Starmer presided over the destruction of sensitive files on the Assange case during his time as DPP. We still have no record of the relevant exchanges, but we know from his own statements he is expected to be regularly briefed on any high-profile case. Now that's the tame stuff. That's already looking very bad. Also worked with the US Department of Justice to extradite other suspects, insisted on attempting to extradite Gary McKinnon in 2008, an autistic IT expert who had gained unauthorised access to US military databases, hoping to find information about USOs. It was a major embarrassment for the US state. They wanted him imprisoned for 70 years. He was suicidal at this point, dragged through the courts. Theresa May, go home vans lady, the individual that sent go home vans around, so not known for her humanitarian touch, withdrew the extradition order, concluding after careful consideration of the relevant material, the extradition would give rise to such a high risk of this man ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with his human rights. Starmer is reported to have reacted with fury, went over to Washington and apologised. Regarding Israel, there is some stuff about Israel. So Tzipi Livni, the former Israeli foreign minister, who's part of Israeli war cabinet during the 2008 assault on Gaza, killed an estimated 1,400 Palestinians, 333 of them children. There was an offer. Starmer could have approved a request, brought them in for questioning, for war crimes charges. However, he delayed to allow the Foreign Office to issue a certificate designating the visit a special mission so they'd be immune from prosecution. In other words, his former comrades, as it says here, from the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, handed him the private application for the arrest on war crimes charges. He could have pushed, he could have got it done, decided to let this individual off the hook. A lot of law and order stuff in there, supporting a government super database that would collect all phone and internet communications, CPS guidelines to facilitate the prosecution of peaceful protesters, and to punish alleged rioters with harsher jail sentences, protecting undercover police officers stitching up left-wing activists. This final paragraph from the article is the thing I really want to get to, and it's this. Starmer treated allies and employees of the US-UK security apparatus somewhat differently to its opponents. In 2010, he was asked to rule on the case of Binyam Mohammed, a terror suspect who had been arrested in Pakistan in 2002 and tortured under the supervision of 4 FBI officers. Mohammed was kept in a 2-metre by 2.5-metre cell, beaten frequently with a leather strap and hung from the ceiling for an entire week. During this period, he was visited by MI5 agents who observed his punishment firsthand and warned that if he did not answer their questions, he would be sent to a country whose laws would permit the use of more extreme interrogation tactics. This is precisely what happened 3 months later. The CIA transferred him to a secret prison in Morocco, where his captors repeatedly slashed his penis and chest with razor blades, burnt him with hot liquid and forced him to stay awake for 48-hour periods while playing loud, repetitive music. MI5 continued to oversee the operation from afar, providing Mohammed's interrogators with specific questions about his contacts in the UK and discussing the timescale of his detention with them. After he was released without charge, Mohammed produced evidence of British involvement in his torture. It fell to Starmer to decide whether the lead MI5 officer would be prosecuted, right? This is, there's evidence of the involvement here. Starmer decided he would not. He later made the same ruling in relation to an MI6 officer accused of sanctioning the torture of detainees in Bagram Air Base. Does it get any worse than that? I do want to, be very cautious here, because it is, a lot of this is quite graphic. It's very extreme. No one with, a very basic sense of decency would not be appalled by any of that. He's got some real filth in his past. The lid needs blowing off on this. Horrendous, disgusting. Please do get in touch throughout the show in the chat with your thoughts, or you can email us, tobyjoshua2004@gmail.com. Keir Starmer is, in my view, unfit to be Prime Minister. This is sickening. This is grim. It does betray his true principles, right? This is not a progressive record. Keir Starmer is not liberal. He's authoritarian. He is not progressive. We know he's not a leftist, but he's not a progressive liberal here. He is regressive on civil liberties. He's basically Priti Patel when it comes to things like civil liberties. This guy is not on the side of protest movements. This guy is the guy that prosecutes protest movements. No more lesser evil politics for me. If I was in the US, I did advocate a vote for Biden, but seeing the administration, I was under no illusions originally, but revising my position, if I had been in the United States and had been a voter in the 2020 election, I would not have voted for Joe Biden. I would not have voted for Donald Trump. I would have voted for the Green Party presidential candidate. That would be my preference in future. And here in Britain, I could not in good conscience advocate a vote for Keir Starmer to become Prime Minister. I would vote for a left Labour MP, left Labour councillor, a Green Party official, Socialist Workers official, even a progressive Lib Dem if they exist. They don't seem to exist, but if they did exist, I'd vote for a progressive Lib Dem. I just would not vote for Labour for the sake of Labour to put Keir Starmer in number 10. I can't trust Keir Starmer with the British security state. I don't care about Boris Johnson. I could not trust putting this man into 10 Downing Street. Simple as that. Okay, that's not a comment on Boris Johnson or on anyone else around it. We just have to look at it. Joe Biden was unfit for presidency. Keir Starmer is unfit for the Prime Ministership. That does not detract from the hideousness of Boris Johnson or indeed Donald Trump. There is hope in this country. Don't feel hopeless. There is a long-term hope. The left has all the ideas. And in the coming decades, there'll be a demographic shift, and we have the opportunity to have a genuinely progressive government. That genuinely progressive government will not be led by Keir Starmer. Not with this leader of the opposition, not with this Labour Party leader. I'm calling time. That's it for me with Keir Starmer. Rebecca Long-Bailey should have pushed further during the leadership campaign. The image Keir Starmer projected of himself was entirely fabricated. Lefty, progressive human rights lawyer. It was all bullshit from beginning to end. I don't expect any of this to harm the guy politically. We know how these things are. We know this will be suppressed. We know, Jeremy Corbyn was called unfit to be Prime Minister because of innuendos. He might have shaken hands with someone who might have known someone who might have this. This is very blatant stuff from Keir Starmer, but because it was done in the interests of Western imperialism, there will be no awkward questions for Keir Starmer, and we'll hear no more of it. That's really, at its heart, one of the most appalling things about this. Over to the United States, and Joe Biden, a few days ago here, delivering remarks on the American Rescue Plan, which it's on its way to being passed, hopefully.
Good morning, folks. For a few weeks now, an overwhelming percentage of the American public has made it clear that they support my American Rescue Plan. And the House of Representatives took the first step toward making it a reality. And I want to thank, and I called her just a few moments ago, Speaker Pelosi for extraordinary leadership, and all those who supported our plan. And with their vote, we're one step closer to vaccinating the nation. We're one step closer to putting $1,400 in the pockets of Americans. We're one step closer to extending unemployment benefits for millions of Americans who are shortly going to lose them. We're one step closer to helping millions of Americans feed their families and keep a roof over their head. We're one step closer to getting our kids safely back in school. And we're one step closer to getting state and local governments the money they need to prevent massive layoffs for essential workers. Now the bill moves to the United States Senate, where I hope it will receive quick action. We have no time to waste. If we act now, decisively, quickly, and boldly, we can finally get ahead of this virus. We can finally get our economy moving again. And the people of this country have suffered far too much for too long. We need to relieve that suffering. The American Rescue Plan does just that. It relieves the suffering. And it's time to act. I thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
That's everyone's favourite presidential cadaver, Joe Biden there. We're going to have a big talk about this on the show tomorrow. Last show of the week. So please do join us from 7 p.m. tomorrow, because we will be talking about the betrayal of Joe Biden's administration. There's another chapter to that. We'll be looking at the latest polling. We'll be looking at the minimum wage. We'll be looking at the backtracking on various key provisions and why Joe Biden is basically laying out a welcome mat for a Republican landslide in the congressional elections, something none of us want to see in 2022, and what we can do about it. We will be talking about that as our main story on the show tomorrow. Regards to the American Rescue Plan, pass. It's a completely antiquated system. It's not working. The congressional loopholes and procedures and wranglings, it's absolutely ridiculous. The minority party is holding a majority of elected officials and Americans hostage. Completely undemocratic. America remains a kleptocracy, not a democracy, maybe an oligarchy if we're being generous. We need the thing passed. The economy needs the thing passed. Working people need the thing passed. But unfortunately, even if it does pass, it'll be strewn through a litany of broken promises and wasted time. And, things are not looking good. The approval of the Biden administration is definitely on a downward curve, unfortunately. A lot of talk about taxing the wealthy. A lot of standard scaremongering from Americans on this. You would expect this. Taxing the wealthy should be a mainstream position here and in America, particularly in America, where, it's basically communist doctrine to suggest such a thing. It has broad public support. We completely delete in our minds the era, and I acknowledge it was only the white middle class, but there was a big boom for the middle class, right? Tax rates on the very wealthiest were in your 70, 80, 90%. That is what we had coming out of World War II, and it worked. You had lower inequality, you had more happiness, more prosperity, albeit, as I say, only for white families, but we can, we can reverse that this time, obviously. But, we do have to remember those historical caveats that actually for black Americans it was living hell and they didn't get in on the deal at that time. But, it worked for the middle class from an economic standpoint. Scaremongering about these policies is rife, and it's really an indication of how crazily to the right the political spectrum in America has skewed itself. That, positions and people like, for example, AOC, who in any other country would be a mainstream moderate social democrat, particularly in European or Scandinavian countries, and even to an extent here, there'd be, a moderate Labour MP. Whereas over there, we're calling them democratic socialists and they're radical socialists, when actually everything I've heard from AOC just makes me think she's a social democrat, definitely to the right of Jeremy Corbyn. It's just a wholly strange situation that we're all greeted with. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said President Biden will wait to address a joint session of Congress until after Congress decides on the American Rescue Plan, his coronavirus relief package. No date for the address has yet been scheduled, even though the president had suggested it would take place in February. Psaki, during yesterday's briefing, said when it became clear, which it should have been from the beginning, that the American Rescue Plan would take about, hopefully, until mid-March to get passed and signed into law, we made a decision internally that we weren't going to have the president propose his forward-looking agenda beyond that, noting that part of the Build Back Better agenda is still being determined internally. There are discussions going on and saying we won't do the address to Congress until after the bill is signed, until after those checks are going out to Americans, until after that vaccine money is going out, and after that money is going out to schools. These comments come after the president endorsed a plan from moderate Democrats to narrow income eligibility for the third round of stimulus checks in his nearly $2 trillion coronavirus relief package, which is a disgrace. We'll be talking. The only reason I'm not, flipping out at that now is we will be talking about that in detail tomorrow when we talk about Joe Biden's betrayal. You have my assurances on that. Now let's have a listen to this from CNN about how GOP states and Republicans are trying to change voting laws after losing the House, Senate, and presidency in 2020. It is CNN, so we don't endorse everything said on here, but have a listen.
Republican states across the country are taking the big lie and turning it into legislation, trying to disadvantage Democratic candidates by making it harder for their voters to cast a ballot. Why? Because Democrats who have embraced popular options like early voting and voting by mail turned out in record numbers, and their guy won. Take, for instance, Georgia, where one of the Republicans who lost a Senate seat in the state's stunning runoff elections in January is trying to stay relevant. Former Republican Senator David Perdue made his first TV appearance since losing the runoff, trying to explain away his loss as something other than Georgians, making it pretty clear that they're just not that into him. And he's now throwing his support behind efforts to limit the ability of people in his state to cast ballots for Democrats after they flipped Georgia blue for the first time since 1992.
We had significant irregularities in the November election that may have affected the outcome, actually. So what the state is trying to do right now is correct some of these potential irregularities and create a level playing field.
No. There were no irregularities that may have affected the outcome of the election. That is a lie more bald-faced than the side of Stone Mountain that doesn't have Confederate generals carved into it. Nonetheless, on Monday, Georgia Republicans got a bill through the Georgia House that, among other voting restrictions, would limit the location and hours of drop boxes. It would require voters show ID when voting absentee and severely limit early voting on weekends. Sunday early voting would be eradicated, meaning no Sunday soul to the polls, impacting black voters in Georgia in particular. The bill now goes to the Georgia Senate, and Democrats are calling it a, quote, dark day. Congresswoman Nikema Williams, chairwoman of the Democratic Party in Georgia, said this: "Let history show that instead of fighting for our democracy, these cowards betrayed Georgia voters, threw out truth and facts, and attempted to undo Georgia's legacy as a home for civil rights and accessible elections." State Representative Barry Fleming, a Republican, wrote the bill.
Okay. Also, regarding I mean, it's quite shocking and appalling. Trump as well, of course, remains a political force, absolutely deadly. But Republicans more broadly are slowly attempting to dismantle democracy, brick by brick by brick. And whatever the criticisms there are of Democrats, and believe me, a lot of this show is dedicated to airing them, they're not trying to dismantle democracy brick by brick by brick, at least not in the same overt way, maybe in more implied ways. Over here, if you direct your attention towards the screen right now, this is polling from YouGov. You know, they're very reliable. People have a go at YouGov, but recently their polling, particularly around the election time, was pretty reliable. I know people say, you know, it's connected to the Tories. Yes, it is, but it's not just churning out propaganda. These are proper polls. And have a look at it. So, this is the latest YouGov poll. It is not what we've seen up until this point from YouGov. It's not been one of the polls really heavily skewed towards the Tories. There have been YouGov leads. I think there was a 4-point YouGov lead for Labour towards the end of 2020. Have a look at this. So, vote share. If a general election was held this month, 45% for the Conservative Party, 32% for the Labour Party. That is Labour down, actually, if you go into the minutiae of the numbers, down on what Jeremy Corbyn achieved, and the Tories up on what was achieved in the election. So Keir Starmer would do worse than Jeremy Corbyn, Boris Johnson would do better than Boris Johnson, and any Tory leader for a very long time. Possibly ever. I think Thatcher got more seats than that once, but besides that. So that is 371 seats of the Tories. That's 197 seats for Labour. That's 7% of the vote for the Greens. Lib Dems only on 6%, down to 8 seats. 5% for the SNP, they're on 50 seats. 3% for Reform UK. That would be a worse result for Labour than 2019. I think we need to start realising Corbyn wasn't the problem. Corbyn altered the trend of permanent decline for Labour in 2017. And held it up remarkably well considering the circumstances in 2019. This is beyond dire, and let's once and for all put to bed the assertion that the problem was Jeremy Corbyn. It very clearly wasn't. We're under Keir Starmer, and this is what we're seeing. You know, this is absolutely abysmal. And if we look at the polling here, who would make the best Prime Minister? Boris Johnson, 36%. Keir Starmer, 28%. So, I can't think of anything that would get any worse for Labour here. I mean, Labour are being useless. They deserve to lose. They will lose. Annalisa Dodds being completely useless, basically endorsing the Tories' regressive tax rise. It's a really regressive tax rise from Sunak on hitting the lowest income people. It's economically illiterate. Labour won't stand up. They're just sniping from the sidelines. They have no alternative policies. They're not standing up for the people they want to represent. Labour are literally agreeing with everything the Tories have done. They're not building on it. They're not being more ambitious. And they're literally saying this hideous, bracket creep thing that, sure, some wealthier people will pay more tax, but broadly, at its core, it's hitting the poorest in terms of a tax rise. You know, the wealthy have the savings. Hit them. They're not spending. You give poor people money, right? Poorer people in the economy, it's a fact. They have money. They're more likely to go out and spend it in their local high streets and reinvigorate the economy, okay? You give it to wealthy people, not so much. They hoard it. The economically productive thing is to keep more money in the pockets of poorer people and more vulnerable people in society and working class people, and take it out of the pockets of the wealthiest because they won't spend much of it. They won't invest much of it. Annalisa Dodds and ignoring that, Rishi Sunak ignoring that, it will harm the recovery. Here's Annalisa Dodds on Sky News, sniping with no alternatives.
Well, I think one of the most significant things that came out of yesterday was the OBR's assessment that the UK has had the worst economic crisis of any major economy, and they set out in black and white how that's linked to really the poor management of COVID in the UK, the fact that we've had longer lockdowns that obviously took place later that have been more intense than in other countries, the fact we've had more circulation of the disease. So in that context, we really needed a budget to set us on the path to economic recovery. We needed to see household budgets supported by the Chancellor. We needed to see the new jobs that are so necessary to get our economy going again supported by the Chancellor. And we needed to see, of course, our NHS supported to rebuild. And I'm afraid, very sadly, on all those elements, we didn't see the budget that we needed. The Chancellor's going ahead with that big rise on council tax for families that'll impact them so substantially. He also isn't backing the new jobs that we need to see, particularly the new green jobs that are so important across the country. And finally, he's actually reducing the amount of money going into our NHS in future years compared to what was budgeted for before. You won't find a single economist or health expert who would say there'll be less demand on our NHS after this COVID period than we anticipated before the pandemic. So this was not the budget that we needed to see yesterday.
Labour, Keir Starmer's Labour shit the bed again, basically. We're right there, you know. Big issues with the budget, you know, money going out of the NHS, all these sort of things. Labour have abandoned the ground, this was said in Tribune today, abandoned the ground of economic populism to the Tories. Doesn't matter how performative they're being, Labour aren't offering anything concrete in return, or at least anything memorable that's concrete in return, and it's absolutely ridiculous. The royal family are having a mad one as well. You know, I would draw parallels between their treatment of Meghan Markle, their treatment of Jeremy Corbyn. Someone pisses off the establishment, you know, in a concrete way. Jeremy Corbyn, a superficial way. Meghan Markle, they go for it. Hear this, the vitriol from the snivelling BBC royal correspondent.
Very difficult timing. We are a matter of days away from the full broadcast of the interview in the US.
Yes, not great for somebody with a heart condition, is it really? I think it's fair to say that the palace must be feeling baffled and, frankly, bemused by all of this. What are the falsehoods that Meghan alleges the firm has been perpetuating? Now, hopefully Oprah Winfrey has pushed back and challenged her in the interview to say, well, what are you talking about? What is the chapter and verse of these falsehoods that you say are being put about? And only then, if she does spell it all out, will we really be in a position to judge, I think, the credibility and the substance of what it is that she is alleging.
As Owen Jones said earlier, this is a cantankerous spokesman for the royal family, not an impartial journalist. Little clip of Meghan Markle here in the upcoming interview. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it. Have a listen.
How do you feel about the palace hearing you speak your truth today?
I don't know how they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent if there is an active role that the firm is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us. And if that comes with risk of losing things, I mean, there's a lot that's been lost already.
Ignore the dramatic. They would Americanise it, wouldn't they? But should be fascinating. An Orwellian witch hunt regarding Jeremy Corbyn continues. So, this is the Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs. It's an advocacy agent of Jewish Federations of Canada. I'm sure we've all never heard of it before. It's quite a niche one. But they put out a press release saying the Board of Deputies of British Jews and the CIJA appalled that disgraced former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn invited to spread toxicity in Canada. I believe he was doing a Zoom call with a progressive group in Canada or something along these lines. I had a picture of him there looking shifty, deliberately a picture where he looked shifty. Orwellian, okay? They're chasing this man down to the end of the earth. Insane, okay? It's insane. Insane. So in closing, the witch hunt continues. It is, at this point, you know, even if you didn't like Jeremy Corbyn, can't we just leave him alone now? But also, fuck the royals. They're going after a black woman who dared marry into the family, disturbing their old imperialist outlook, and they are sheltering a paedophile or an accused paedophile, someone with credible accusations of child rape against them. Obviously, we don't know if any of it's true. I'll backpedal on what I just said because, you know, legally alleged involvement in child rape. Prince Andrew, serious issues. That is it from me today. Join us tomorrow to hear about Joe Biden's presidential betrayal. My name's Toby Lepetti-Mesme, and this has been Thursday's MesmePolitics. You are up to date with all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. We told you why Keir Starmer is unfit to be Prime Minister. Tomorrow we tell you why Joe Biden is betraying all his pledges now he's in office. Thank you for joining us today. We will be here, same time, same place tomorrow for the last show of the week. Have a lovely Friday. Hope you're gearing up for the weekend, and I'll see you soon.